So I think we'll start. So I want to welcome you all. Thank you for coming and for tuning in to this Voices from the Field session, the first of its kind, a new series that we have started, a series of conversations where we are featuring people with hands-on direct experience with strategies and projects that can help us strengthen local economies and communities in different parts of the world. And in this first session, this first session is focused on time banking and community food initiatives. And we'll be hearing from Kate Macdonald from Hull in Yorkshire in the UK. And Kate, she has lots of hats. She's the founder of the TimeBank Hull and East Riding. She's the coordinator of the Freedom Festival, which is a giant local food feast. She's the co-founder of Gardens and Open Spaces in Hull, and she's also the steward of the Mutual Aid Network in Hull, and lots of other things that she's involved with. But I won't speak more about that. I'd rather, let's hear it from Kate herself. Kate, welcome to our first session.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. It's like all of these things that I'm involved in, it's a part of a collective. So with a feast, it's the people. It's not one person.
Yes, absolutely. And we met at some years back at the Freedom Festival, and I took part in your festival and was really, really impressed and inspired by all the things that you had to share and all the things that you are involved with and that is going on in Hull. And that's why I thought of you as the perfect person to help us kickstart this series. So I'm really, really grateful for your time. So let's start, Kate. I want to start with the time banking. So what is the time bank exactly? Because some people might not know. And why did you get started at this? What motivated you?
Oh, goodness. Well, I always say with time banking, it's what it says on the tin. It's like a bank of time. So the idea behind time banking is it's about sharing anything that can be measured by time. So that could be skills, it could be support, it could be spaces. So and the beautiful thing about time banking is that it's an hour for an hour. So it doesn't matter what the exchange is, everyone's hour is worth the same. So that's the start of something beautiful that happens and is a big part of my learning over the years. So yeah.
Yeah, so 1 hour for an hour, that sounds like a very just way of accounting for people's efforts, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess my motivation to do it, I'd been aware of time banking for a number of years, and I'd previously worked in mental health and particularly early psychosis services, and we saw how often the sort of key to people recovering was actually being able to contribute something or finding what interests that sparked a twinkle in their eyes to actually start reconnecting to their community. And I'd sort of had it, it's like one of my on-the-shelf projects. It's like, this feels like it could be something that enables people to reconnect to their communities. But it actually really came to the fore for me, and it's very much a sort of gut feeling. I was sat in my shed. I used to have a shed at the bottom of the garden, and I heard on the radio that it was when austerity was really starting to hit Hull, and Hull's often at the top of the things it shouldn't be part of in terms of unemployment, long-term health conditions, and all, and bottom of the things that you want to be. And the predictions around the recovery in Hull were like much longer than other cities in the UK. And I heard on the radio that a caravan factory, which is one of our big industries in the area, used to be fish, I hasten to add, but had gone into administration. And I just remembered back to the sort of previous government. We got the coalition government in place at the time, and I don't know, just knowing like that thing about losing your job and the rhetoric about it, and the importance of being able to have a role and contribute, what that means to your sort of sense of who you are as a person, and being able to both contribute something and also receive something. So initially I'd seen it as a bridge back to community for young people and their families, but that was my sort of light bulb moment where it was like, but the whole community needs to be part of this. And at that time it was very much a sort of functional thing as well. Oh, it can help you to contribute and you can also save money at the same time. But it was like over the years, what the beautiful thing that the things that I've learned from what it actually can facilitate as something that sort of came out of that. And I never knew I'd become an economics geek and actually start questioning the sort of whole systems and all the stuff that like Local Futures talks about, the systems and the narrative, the stories that we are told are the truth about how we should be living or do live, and that's it. So yeah, it unlocked all of that. And yeah, so that was my starting point, in a shed.
Yeah, and when you say it like that, it sounds to me that it has to be very empowering, because it gives everybody a role, well, everybody that participates, a role and a skill that they can share with other people. So you get away from these traditional identities and hierarchies, no, of who has something to offer and who doesn't.
Yeah, and I think really most importantly, it's this sort of narrative about the needy and the needed. You know, so and the thing is, it's saying we all have gifts to offer. And when someone says, well, they don't have anything to offer, it's like, you just need to have the right conversation with somebody. Everyone has something to offer. Absolutely. And so it's moving out and also moving away from a place of expertise as well. We've been disempowered as communities about sharing stuff. There's so many skills and knowledge that we would share down generations of families, and in some ways, you know, even if you just look at us being disconnected from our land and everything, we've lost, there's a gap to that. So we've lost that knowledge that just tends to get passed down in an informal way, and we're sort of stuck into this space of passivity and asking permission to share our gifts. And I just think like what time banking has the potential to do and can do is it unlocks the abundance. It moves us away in our communities that's hidden, often hidden, and enables us to not ask permission of like someone giving you a job or needing money or whatever. But I always say, if we share what we have what we need, and that goes all into everything. So yeah.
Can you give us some examples of the kind of skills that are offered or the thing that people are looking for in a time bank, and also say a little bit about kind of how it works? I imagine it's got to be hugely complicated, just keeping track of these hours of credit, of debit, you know, and, you know, share a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing with time banking is it's about having a different conversation with people. So it is literally a practical thing of asking people about the things that they're interested in and that they might want to offer, and the things that they need. Very often people just want to offer. You know, we've seen through the pandemic, we know people are generous and want to help each other. The challenge with time banking is people actually going to a place of vulnerability, in a sense, to actually ask for help. And there's something, again, in time banking, it's really interesting in how it enables you to start redefining value in how we measure stuff with money and everything. I'm sort of going off on a slight tangent there, but like on a real practical level, I mean, you know, you'd sent me a note of a question about how you set up a time bank. This is an international movement, so there are time banks all over the world, and there are umbrella organizations that actually can help you, and it's a very generous community. So if you're thinking of starting a time bank, then just ask a time bank that's already in place. But crucially, so for example, in the UK, we have Timebanking UK. It's a very small membership to join Timebanking UK, and then you get access to this software. So the way those sort of skills are, it's like you have an advert on a system that people can search, and then they can get in contact with you to actually say, oh, I'm interested in doing that. So I mean, goodness, in the range of sort of skills that are available. I mean, I myself, we're all time bank members ourselves. part of my motivation as well to set up the Time Bank is I always say I'm interested in everything and master of nothing. So it's an opportunity for you to try all sorts of things. But I also teach yoga, so I offer yoga for time credits. We had someone that signed up last week who is a photographer and stylist. She does food styling and all sorts of things, but she was looking for a mentor because she has, like many of, I think we all do to some extent, imposter syndrome. She just felt she needed a mentor to sort of check out what she was doing. I think there's something in here is we don't all have to be expert or at anything to start with, but we can get the help from people whose strength that is. It's very much about a strengths-based approach. I don't know, you could learn Italian, or I had a member that took my dog for a walk yesterday. I've got a beautiful story of, and what I love about it as well is, I always say time banking, it's a mechanism, not a thing. So we're very often behind things because people are the thing. People get on with it. Once they get over the thing of asking for help, and that's something I was going to say, that thing about asking for help. There's something about when we have money, you pay for a service and then that shuts the transaction down. There's something more emotional that happens when you're actually not exchanging money and you're exchanging time in that way, that enables relational networks to, it doesn't shut down the transaction, it creates a chain reaction of that transaction. So we've got chefs, it could be the most simple thing of giving someone a lift or anything. I always say, yeah, ask me anything. I'll just give you a really beautiful example that came to light recently though. So we are a regional time bank, so we have different hubs in different parts of Hull and East Riding, and up in Bridlington we've got a member who's an amazingly inspiring woman. She set up a Bridlington Vegan Festival, the Transition Network, and she has a local whole food shop and yoga studio there. And sadly, during COVID, she found that she had, during the pandemic, had cancer, and she's in treatment at the moment, but basically she's got to a point that, well, she needed to keep the shop going. And I found out that the shop had kept going through people earning time credits and just doing a few hours here and there. And now that sort of collective of people, they're on the verge of creating a worker co-op. And she's like moving to be with her family to look after and everything. But there's a legacy where that time banking has actually helped facilitate, and they're looking for donations of time credits so that they can exchange that. I mean, there is a sort of thing, time banking shouldn't replace paid work, but because we do still need money. There's all sorts of things with tax implications, all that. You don't get, it's not got a tax implication because everyone's hour is worth the same. But that to me was like, how beautiful is that? And we didn't even, that's something that just happened. So it's a mechanism that when people get it, they can just use that. So yeah.
Well, that's almost mind-boggling. I don't think I've ever heard of a time bank where they've actually worked so they could keep a shop going in a time of crisis. So that's a whole new aspect I hadn't even thought about. Sort of, do you have any trouble ever with people receiving too much and not offering enough? And I mean, I suppose those kind of things could really become a huge challenge.
That's a question that we're asked less often now, but in the beginning, and I think this is something about how our brains think in this scarcity economy. What if people get too much for nothing? In fact, it's the opposite that's the challenge. People want to contribute. So, and I think this goes back to the place we're often in, where we're used to being receivers of a service. So it's about being proactive to actually enable, I always say, give people the gift of being able to give something to you. So the challenge is getting people to ask, because everyone wants to give. So that can be something. So I was talking, it's like, I see it like an old record where you get into the time bank groove, that you realize that it's about reciprocity. It's like, so it's both giving and getting, but ultimately it's not about it as a transaction. It's about the relational aspects of it, which is the beautiful thing. But what we find, and sometimes, well, quite often people go, well, time banking doesn't work because people stop stop logging their hours. But as my friend and colleague Stephanie Rearick, who's the founder of Mutual Aid Network, said, but that's because we're decolonializing our minds about value, and then we're just getting into more of a sharing economy where we both give and we get as well. So time banking, it's a tool that's part of a whole range of tools of how we can exchange with each other to get things done. And it, you know, if you need it, use it, and if it doesn't work in that context, don't use it.
What do you consider to have been like the main benefits of the time bank? You've already, mentioned some of them here, but sort of in the years, over the years.
I think, yeah, there's something important in the equity of the, you know, like that people, that everyone's hours worth the same. And it's also the fact that this time bank, you do get time banks that actually get set up for older people or for mental health service users, and I think that's completely missing the point, because that, you know, that as a whole community we can offer the solutions to the problems that we face, and to share our gifts. And I'm losing my train of thought there again as well. What was the question again, Anja? Sorry.
Like what do you consider to be the main benefits of the time bank, at least in Hull?
Yes, so it's that equality that enables people to connect from different walks of life. I mean, we have a river that goes through Hull, and people always say, well, people don't go from East Hull to West Hull or West Hull to East Hull, but they do with time banking, you know. And like through the pandemic, because we've done more on Zoom, people have connected from like seaside coastal towns to, you know, like across the whole region. It gives you a vehicle to connect, and potentially to connect across difference as well. So people might join a time bank for different reasons. It might be because just they love the values. It might be they want to contribute something, or they need something. But I always say you sort of meet them at that point, and then they can go as deep as they want. But what I see is the really unique thing is it's about how it enables you to build relational networks and trust. And it also has the potential to scale those networks as well. So if people are lucky enough to be in a situation where they have lots of people that they know, that they have a culture of sort of helping each other and all of that, you might often say, well, we don't need it. And it's like, no, but there might be something in the time bank, that there might be a particular skill that you don't have when you've got a particular idea or something that you want to do. So I just think it's like, how can we, it's a mechanism to scale things and expand those relational networks. But crucially, and I think we just need this so much, is having spaces where people can connect across difference. So you've got that basic and a vehicle of mutual understanding that enables you to have different conversations. So if you might be in completely different political viewpoints, or you might have, I don't know, for example, a perception of people who are, you know, asylum seekers, you know, people coming into the country and all of that, and it enables people to like come together and learn about each other and realize that we're really similar, you know, and similar needs, and also that, you know, like opening up to, it's like a gift, a present, because everyone knows that everyone is there because they're offering something and they need something. It's an immediate conversation starter to actually get straight into there about what's important to people. And I mean, we've got a project that is we call Thrive, and it's like time banking in business. So it's actually going into sort of organizations and looking at as a tool to well-being. You know, if companies have you know, that sometimes they have a couple of days a year that people can contribute to the community, rather than sort of looking around for a project to do, they can get linked up with things that they're passionate about sharing. But ultimately, by having that sort of conversation within the workplace, you open up a whole other thing about who is this. It's like putting someone into 3D Technicolor of all the things that they're interested in their outside world. So I always say it's about bringing life into work and work into life. And just talking about work, there's something else that we talk about in to open up a sort of question about what we value in society as well. And so I always ask people about, what does the term work mean to them? And very often people will say it's what you get paid for. And then you can say, and how many people are lucky enough to have a job that is something that makes their heart sing, that they feel is contributing something good into the community or whatever, or how many jobs are bullshit jobs. And then how many people, and so the 5 types of worker, you know, like that sort of work, there's care work. So because we don't have time to be at home, and this is something again that might be a gift of the pandemic, that we've been able to connect to nature, we start to grow stuff, we've maybe got a dog, but it's like then we're going back into work, and then we're outsourcing our dog care, we're outsourcing our care of our elders, where, you know, and people I hope that there's a seed of hope there, that people go, I want more of that, I want to be able to do that care work, I want to be in a community sort of work and have those community connections, and I want space for self-work, that place for reflection and presencing and being in nature and connecting into the interconnectedness of all things. And the 5th type as work is keeping the balanced type of work. So when we talk about all of those things, I'm definitely someone who talks about all of that and really hasn't got the balance right, for sure. But I think it's when you sort of talk about work in that context, then people who are maybe members of a community that could not hold down a conventional job, but you actually look at what they're doing in their communities, and they're that community glue. And you can also talk about people who are working and then they're in poverty of time or community connections. Exactly. And all of that. So I think there's something in here about how, and this brings it out into that whole, how does all this link into the systemic frame of the problems that we're facing, and taking a systemic frame in how we deal with those as a community together. And crucially enabling us as members of the community to actually step into our personal power and agency and work together. This is the crucial thing.
Yeah. And we've already got some really good questions here about the time banking. But before we get to the questions, I want to hear a bit about the work you've been doing around food, because from the time banking, you shifted into, well, not moved away from, but you shifted into working around food, connecting local people to local food in many different ways. So can you say a little bit about the projects that you've been involved, the ones you think are most significant and that you want to share about?
Yeah, and I guess it could be something about what has catalyzed the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So yeah. Well, again, it's like I said at the beginning, it's like the festival, the whole Harvest Festival, that was something that came about in 2015. And what I would always say in terms of the Time Bank, we're a facilitator, we're not the thing. And that there's the thing in there about the relational networks and the trust, which enables you to do things quicker than it might normally take, and it also enables you to do things with less money than it might ordinarily take. So our first feast, it came out of a conversation between some like growers. We've got loads of community gardens and all of that across the city, and there were some growers, some of whom were TimeBank members, and they were just talking about what they would do with their gluts of produce. And then it was like, well, let's have a community meal. And then we were approached by another organisation who was connected to them, and said, what about doing a feast in the city centre in Hull? And it's like, yeah, let's just do it. And we just did it. And we it's funny, one of our organisational members is a church. We've got 2 really old churches, a Minster and a really old church. They both claim each one is the eldest. I think it's probably a few months. But this particular church, it's well known for its acoustics, beautiful acoustics, but it's incredibly cold. But we thought, perfect for storing veg in the summer. So we put a call out for veg pledges. The church had agreed. They really liked the idea, because I remember they've got their portal where they used to give out food to the community hundreds of years ago and all of that. And then we put a call out and for people to sort of pledge veg, and then we sort of connected through all the different organisations, community growing sites, and also the local professional sort of small scale. You know, like it was a veg box scheme, there was a community assisted agriculture scheme with, you know, just in locally to actually contribute veg. And we, at that feast, what we wanted to do was like sort of demonstrate that we've got an abundance of produce and we want to share it with you, and then to enable people to, people had opportunities to plant seeds there and take them home. And we really aspired. I remember we said we had a veg bed sculpture. It was literally a bed and we put some veg plants on it. But later we did get our dream about linking the arts to the feast. The point of that day was, well, in the lead up to it, we didn't know how many donations we would get, and people weren't actually saying what they were going to give us. And then we checked it out. They were going, well, it's because we don't know what's going to be ready at that point. But in the week coming up to that, I remember going into that church, and it was like the pews were just full of veg, and it was like from someone providing some herbs from their garden, because it was like anyone could contribute. Something that we did by accident, but we realized that it was a really important part of it, was we'd set up a Facebook page, we'd put the word out about it, and everyone wanted to get involved, but we'd forgotten to put our logos on it, because you always have to put your logos on, don't you? But that was the key to everyone being able to get involved, because I think what is a challenge, people go, well, I'm not doing it if they're doing it, or it's just this weird thing. So that's great, and we always said it's the power of the collective, and it's like our message was this is the gift from the growers of Hull, the chefs that have cooked the food, the people who've prepped it, and it's brought to you by sharing skills based stuff. What could you do? It's a catalyst to what could you do. And I mean, it was a third full of veg. We fed 500 people on that day. It was because we hadn't even planned it properly. I remember, well, we had planned it. We just had a skeletal structure. So so at 3 o'clock there will be a competition of chutneys or something like that. We didn't know if anyone was going to bring anything. And I remember it got to about 3:15 and I thought, oh God, I haven't checked. We've got to set up the competition. But someone had, and it was just happening, and they were giving out prizes. That's, we've got these rosettes that people had made, and it was just a beautiful thing where people were able to step up. But I remember standing there. There was a local councillor who had enabled us to have the city centre square without having to pay for it, and she had come along, and I said, well, you're going to get some food, and she said, oh, but I don't need it. And I just said, you're a human being, aren't you? We all need food. You'll go and get some. And there was something that was just so surprising, that it was free to everyone, that enabled people just started talking to each other. And it was later that we started to hear stories of people who had said, oh, I met at the feast, and had become friends, people who had been inspired to set up their own project. Someone who, I remember at the time, Hull Help for Refugees was a sort of inspiring project that was just getting started, and people connected there and are still involved in that. And it was that sort of ripple effect. And there's something amazing around how food is that thing about bringing people together that breaks down barriers to enable people to start happening. So anyway, that was beautiful. Out of that came, we brought together all the people, there were about 40 or 50 people, not counting probably hundreds of people who contributed food, but we asked them what they thought and what they wanted next. And they thought the idea of a growers network would be really good, to actually sort of think about, well, how do we continue to distribute food? How can we connect it across all the different sites? How can we share skills? So we did manage to get a little bit of funding to do that. And that's still a work in progress, and it's reigniting now. But we did the feast again in 2016. It was a wonderful thing. And then the Freedom Festival actually got in contact with us. We were City of Culture that year, and that's when we had our connection to an international arts festival, and they wanted a meal for the people. So that year we fed 1,500 people in 3 hours, like a 3-course meal, and completely with local produce. So there was a local tomato grower that gave us 3 tons of tomatoes. It was crazy. We never wasted any. We would just made loads of tomato sauce afterwards, sun-dried tomatoes, everything. But what it demonstrated was the beautiful abundance. It's a real thing, that's there, that's hidden, and it's how do we have those mechanisms to connect these things. We did it again in 2018 with the Freedom Festival, and that time we actually commissioned a local community assisted agriculture scheme to grow food for it. We paid them. and it was like, yeah, we need this as a platform of like goodwill. We need to look at how this links into something that's really meaty about like looking at our local. I mean, that was always in there about local food systems, but actually really looking at how we build a regenerative local food system. So at that point we said we were doing sort of more local feasts. We started doing the local ones out in the wider community, but we just thought, no, we're going to stop this big one because the message sort of got lost a bit. It was so huge, and it felt like we wanted to actually focus our attention on what are the things, you know, what are the actual practical things that we need to do to actually start having an impact locally. And something that did follow, I just wanted to say, we do have Hull Food Partnership now, which links into sustainable food places, and so there's lots of things that have sort of come along that are all interconnected, and but it was still at the very beginning, really.
But it seems to me that I can certainly understand why you wanted to move away from the big one, even though it was rather remarkable. I mean, I was there at one of them, and it was very remarkable to see thousands of people literally being fed by volunteers and local food in just 3 hours. But it must have worked very well as a way of shining the light on local food, no? And as you say, that sort of sparked the Growers Network. And then you also mentioned to me at one point about a community kitchen.
Oh yeah.
How does that play in?
Yeah.
What's the role of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's another initiative, Gardens and Open Spaces, Hull, that came out. That this is something that emerged during lockdown around actually a more joined up approach about and a citizen party, you know, the local authority working alongside citizens around how we use open spaces and how we enable people to grow food on those open spaces. Mm-hmm. That's another initiative. So for us, we do now have a community centre that has a professional kitchen, and I mentioned mutual aid networks earlier, and we're part of like this sort of global cooperative which is looking at all these ways of exchanging, where current TimeBank, where money's the last thing you use rather than the first to enable yourself to do things. So something that out of the feast, we built up a field kitchen of equipment, you know, massive pans, burners, gazebos and stuff like that, that are now available as a library of kitchen stuff for people who want to do community events, but also for people who are setting up their own food businesses to actually do events themselves. We now have this professional kitchen, so people can actually hire that space for hours if they're contributing to our sort of events, and they can help. Rather, I guess what we're saying is, if you're setting up a food business, like why buy stuff initially? Why you know, we have all these community kitchens, community spaces that are underutilized. So how can we open that up to, it's just linking business into community? And yeah, so we have that community kitchen. We've got the feast collective, so we've got a collective of chefs who are well experienced in big sort of feasts, but it's actually now we've linked up with the Workers' Education Association, so we're developing, you know, a food entrepreneurs course, and the idea is that this is about, and we really want to like look closer at the supply chain as well, you know, because we need more local food initiatives, business initiatives, but it's not about us making. We still have the thing about like growth and big business and stuff like that, you know. It's like, how can we have small business that collaborate with each other and help each other, whether that's through their experience of doing it or sharing equipment or all of that. So we're just a part of that puzzle. And, you know, like through the Hull Food Partnership now, which is, I mean, the Sustainable Food Places in the UK, it's a fantastic sort of initiative that like different cities, in order to be a sustainable food place, you have to have a partnership with the local authority, which is and it's not about writing a strategy. In order to get the different rewards, there has to be action in association with that. So yeah, it feels like there's a lot happening, but there's a long way to go. And my biggest frustration is that all of this stuff is happening in silos. And I'd say the main growth business in food at the moment is food banks. and
yeah.
and you know, and organizations making it is part of their business model about redistributing waste food. I think we need to just have a sort of greater, it's whilst yes we do want to redistribute that, but how can we look at that as big part of that's like the old system in a sense. It's like how alongside that are we incubating this sort of regenerative food economy and skills, you know, and that's skills from people growing in their own gardens to connecting to community spaces. So there's another thing we're doing with our community spaces and professional growers. We're currently doing a mapping exercise, not just saying there's a community garden here. It's like, what is the USP of this community space? Is it permaculture? Is it no dig? Is it pruning? Is it fruit? You know, we've got organic market garden in East Riding, and Gwen, she's an inspirational woman, and she wants to share her knowledge. She's also a soil chemist, so she's doing all sorts of experiments about, I'm no expert in soil regeneration or whatever, but like how can that be shared in the wider community? How can people who have woken up to like, I really want to grow my own food, I've seen that space that I want to connect to, how can we make that easier? How can they learn in the community spaces where there's amazing expertise to enable them to, but then they learn by contributing, because these places also often suffer from not having enough volunteers as well, but then can go back and actually start growing food in their local community as well, and hopefully even start their own business.
So the mapping of these initiatives, and I think you also said the gardens and open spaces is also working as a bit of a networker, joining all these together, because you're saying, you said that a number of times, that one of the key problems, you could say, or challenges, is this, that there's so many things going on, but they're not linking up together.
Yeah, and I think people don't see the bigger picture. They just see, particularly when people, I don't know, it's interesting in statutory bodies, it's like that their job is healthy eating, their job is, I don't know, like food business. It's like part of gardens and open spaces, it's about biodiversity as well. So it's like, on one hand, you've like being encouraged to like plant buckthorn, or, you know, do stuff that around green corridors, and on the other hand, the council contractors are mowing it all down again. And, you know, on the one hand saying we're planting trees, but on the other hand they're cutting down sort of like mature trees that are our natural sponges around flood. You know, it's that systemic framework of not doing all these bits in silos, but we need to like have that bigger frame. And I don't know, I can't understand why we don't have it. Well, why not? It's too much.
I mean, we have it on a macro scale as well. We have all this talk about climate crisis, and then we've had a fossil fuel subsidies for, you know, 3 decades, exactly. You know, and that goes all the way down to the local level, like just like you say, one department will be looking after the environment and promote healthy eating, and the other one will be facilitating, you know, supermarkets and industrial agriculture, just as a few examples now. So we're going to open up now for questions. We've got a whole lot here lined up, but I just have one before we do that. And that is, you know, have you, with all the work you've been doing, I know you've been collaborating with local authorities, and have you in any way been able to influence policy changes, I wonder? That might not have been on your radar, but or radar, well, but just wondering.
I think absolutely, I think, but I don't think it's just, we're just a part of the jigsaw, but like this is where having the whole food partnership is really important, because it has a foot in the local authority, and like you know, now they've got the whole food action plan, they've got the developing a whole food poverty action plan, there's a food charter that's going to be updated, but they're also doing a food strategy, which is about just this, about joining the dots. You know, looking at like food business, looking at oh god, I can't remember the word, tendering, procurement, you know,
public procurement.
Yeah, all of those things, and they're, you know, trying to facilitate. That's food. The whole food strategy is about actually trying to like, let's look at all of these things together. And so it's really important, you know, that that all of the different initiatives and us being part of that link into that and come together around it. So I think that's really interesting. With the council as well, they do actually have a strategy about like encouraging the use of open spaces, but how to navigate it is completely opaque. Even local, you know, when we did a sort of parking space occupation with our with a garden like outside our council Guildhall last year, and it was like even councillors were coming to us and going, we've got this land that we want to do. So there's something in there. There's the will, but then there's a disconnect. And so I think there's, you know, certainly locally, I'm sure this is the case in all sorts of places. I was talking to the chair of the whole food partnership today, and she was saying it's like there's really loads of good stuff happening, and but it's just it's a massive road, and like the current food system that we have is just so big and sleek. It's like it's not even on people's radars that we need to do anything different. So it's a huge challenge. She was almost talking about us as outliers, but with the pandemic and everything and Brexit and all of that, it's more in people's faces now, I think, really, that we really, and obviously with climate and all of that, that we really on so many levels need to be doing something about food as well as everything else.
Yes, but food is central. It's essential, and it's something that we can all play a part in. So we'd certainly at Local Futures agree with you that food is a good way to start and to keep people together. Well, definitely. I'm going to start passing on some of these questions here because there are loads, got lots of engagement. We'll start here with a question from Brad. We're going back to the topic of time banking. How many people are members of the TimeBank? And how long has it been running?
So just locally, so this is our TimeBank is Hull and East Riding, so we have different hubs and everything. So we've probably got about 900 people that are currently on the system, but over time I would say we've probably signed up about 1,400 people over the last 9 or 10 years. Yeah. Oh. The thing about TimeBank is you don't have to be active all the time as well. It's just I call it a family actually that you can be a member of and get involved if you feel like it.
So how many do you think are active in any given time?
Oh goodness.
Would you know?
Probably not. I should have like checked in on the system before I came onto this. There's flurries of activity, and it's quite it's like what I found out about what was going on in Bridlington like recently. I didn't know about that until I was told about that, and hard to say. Hard to say. I should have checked the system, shouldn't I?
No. We don't expect you to be an expert on every single thing here. Brad also asked, what's the platform for the TimeBank? I'm not certain what you mean by that, Brad. If it's the website, we'll add it here. But how much time and money is needed to administer a TimeBank? I mean, that's a very good question.
It is, yeah. So I wonder if he's talking about the sort of platform, the software where people log exchanges and can actually log.
Brad, can you just clarify that, please, in that question? But so how yes, software, he says. He meant the software.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, it's the amount of people that said, oh, I've thought about this thing about exchanging, I'm going to set up an app. We've already got loads of software out there. There's actually an initiative through our mutual aid network led by our vice president of mutual aid network, Sibyl, that is around bringing together software developers from around the world to actually look at how we make the systems better ourselves, and that I think of the word interact, so we can have different systems, so time, mutual credit systems, and that all can interact with each other. So that's interesting. But in the UK, we've got Timebanking UK. They've got their software. There's free software. Community Forge, I think there's someone called Matthew Slade to develop that. So there's free software out there as well. I think it's, you know, there's TimeBanks USA, so that's a membership organisation. They've got their software. So like in the UK, I think to be a member of TimeBanking UK, I think it's about £240 a year, but then you access the software. I think in terms of, so I think TimeBanking itself offers really good value for money, but I do think part of the brokerage, the facilitation, is something that is a job. So very often there have been quite a few local authorities in the UK that have actually invested money into getting local time banks going, and then with the idea that the local community would then do the brokerage, and that doesn't necessarily work, because if you're effectively volunteering your time, then you can't expect to be doing that all the time. Do you know what I mean? So
yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also quite interesting because I often get told you don't talk about what you're doing much, and it's like, because I always say it's the machine, it's the mechanism behind what other people are doing ultimately, you know. So that whole thing of facilitation is often not valued by funders, although we have been very lucky to get funding around that as well. We also do have a funded project, which is a European funded project that is around people setting up their own businesses and getting into work as well. But we're doing that in a sense of how that utilises time banking. So through networks of connection and all of that, how people can both practice their skills, get support from the wider time banking community as well. So yeah, it's you can do it on very little. It's very good value for money.
Yes, I mean, nobody says it has to be on such a big scale either. I mean, if you're in a smaller community, but obviously with so many members, and I've had a look at your website, and I was quite amazed where, you know, everything from someone helping with shopping to getting, you know, knitting lessons and learning Spanish from someone in the community and so forth. So there's obviously a lot to choose from. Here's some more question. Is there a way to retrain people so that we don't just depend on what we have, which is limited due to the loss you just described of traditional skills? I think, I don't know, do you have any as part of the, I think I did see as part of the Time Bank that you also do workshops. I don't know if retraining is part of what you do.
Oh yes, so like skills exchange and skills workshops. Yeah, we do different. We've called them different things over the years, like bring and fixes, where people can learn how to fix things or learn how to sew or garden, or I mean, we had online ukulele lessons with a local musician. It's like, yeah, absolutely, that was amazing. Actually, I really enjoyed that. We had to have the sound off when we were playing the ukuleles. It would have been a nightmare without it. But absolutely, that's a big part of what this is about. Is, you know, I feel very passionately that we need to share the skills that we have, and it's not about becoming an expert either. Yeah.
Brad says again here, has the Time Bank supported other community activities directly and indirectly? It sounded to me like you know, really supported a lot of community activities, because all these things had blossomed from
absolutely. Yeah,
the
I mean, there's
Bank.
another food related one. We're also connected to, like, there's this new national fund called the Ideas Fund, which is really wonderful. It's linking up grassroots communities with academic researchers, and it's about the relationship of how they knowledge exchange between them. But one of the projects that's got funded in Hull is linked to a local park, and they're wanting people to like reconnect to that park, and so they used some of our equipment and got some help from during the time back, got some help from members. It was such a delight, I have to say, to just like enable them to use our space, enable them to take our equipment and to just turn up. I was a bit disappointed that I realised I turned up a bit near the end, so I felt I had to help a bit. But it was such a beautiful thing to like just see, just giving, we've got the resources, we share them, and people fly with it. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Here's another question, which is similar to one I asked. It's, do you keep records of the times? I mean, also the same question, can you go into time debt? But it sounded
absolutely, with a bank of quantitative time credit easing. Absolutely. So yeah, it's in, but you know, it's really interesting that people really don't like going into debt, into time credit debt. But I mean, something that I love doing, because I've earned a lot of time credits in my time, but I donate them to people and projects. That gives me huge pleasure to do that, to be able to donate credits. So I would say it's more likely that people get more credit than debit, and that's the challenge, to encourage them to like ask for things as well. Yeah, but absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it might be culturally a cultural thing that, you know, I could imagine a country like UK or for example in Denmark, where we're not that happy about asking for help,
exactly.
You know, whereas in other countries it may be, the situation may be reversed. I don't know.
And I think I'm just going to say, it's like, yeah, so people can log their own hours. We can help people do that. There's a system for them to do that. You can like look at your statement and everything. But yeah, I've forgotten where I was going with that.
I guess there's an application for this, right? For logging the credits.
Yeah, that's
or
part.
debits.
That's part of the time banking software. Yeah, to do that. Yeah.
And can you get that on the phone? Just out of curiosity, now these days where everybody is there an app for a mobile phone for this?
Yeah, I don't think the software we're using, I don't think the app's working at the moment, but you can still access the sort of web-based thing on your phone. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
So we've got a question here from Steve, who asks, how much time do you and others devote to this project just to maintain the system? Do you also do promotion, or is it all word of mouth?
We've got a bit of an issue at the moment with our own communications. It's been pretty. We need to get some more support with that. I'd say that's one of the big learning points with it, is the importance of actually the online, you know, how we communicate about it, about what's going on and everything else. So, which can sometimes be underestimated how important that is. A lot of, in terms of people signing up, it's a bit of both really, but very often word of mouth. Yeah. Yes, people tell each other about it. Yeah. I in the early days, I talked about it all the time. It was that thing about hearing it from 5 credible sources and all of that. So I would just go Timebanking. Probably did a few people's heads in, but yeah, we have a steady sort of stream of people signing up.
So we've got here Liana asking, saying she would like to know a bit more about the logistic of starting up. What are the steps involved in setting up a time bank?
Yeah, I mean, well, as I said, when I did it, like the starting point for me was like literally in my shed, and it's like I had it was like a field of dreams moment. It was like, I'm going to start talking about it as if it's there, and then the people will come and the resources that we need to make it happen will come. And actually that did happen. And it's the only time I've rung our local newspaper who had got wind of it to beg them not to put it in the newspaper, which of course made them want to put it in the newspaper even more. And it demonstrated, so it's like, right, I've got to be ready to go. I was sort of holding back, everything's got to be perfect. I would say first steps, just to get a group of 10 people together. And you know, maybe about and just start practicing exchanging. What I was saying about the time banking community is like, I would also say the first step is like go to like other time banks and ask for help from them, because so in Time Banking UK, we share our resources. We share, you know, you've got the software's already there, but things like like handbooks and governance, and we've all done it and we've all learned from it, so we're all really happy to share our experiences. So but I think it's just start.
But there might be people here that are in locations or countries where they might be challenged to set up the first time bank. So you're saying get 10 people together. I guess you'd want to some way of keeping up the offers. Are there any rules, basic rules that one needs to agree on?
Not really. It's good if you're setting up an exchange. I would say when you're describing something that you want to be very specific, that I'm looking for this and it might take about 2 hours or an hour to do it, and to agree that. And when you're logging an exchange, to agree with the person who's doing it and received it, how many hours it takes. What we often find in practice is people who've done something for someone else underestimate the amount of hours they've done, and then the other person's going, I want to give you more hours for that. So the other thing is, like, when you very often it's amazing actually how we don't actually value the stuff that we know already. The amount of people that say, I don't know what I could offer. And so having something like an interest checklist is really helpful. So just a list of the sorts of things that, whether it might be mending a puncture on a bike, teaching a language, giving someone a lift, it just gets people's imaginations going, and helping someone with a form, writing a letter, and it's like, oh, I could do that. Very often people will tick loads of them. I remember there's like someone ticked housework, iron, all of that, and I go, do you like ironing? And I go, no, I hate it. I was like, well, don't offer it on the Timebank. Offer things you don't, even if you can do it, offer the things you like doing. Get someone else to do your ironing.
Here's another question. How can we encourage people to prioritize time-banking producers rather than the global economy, even if the time-bank product or service is not yet as good in some ways? And she's saying here, or you are, I don't know, this is something even J.C. Kumarappa noticed in the 1940s in Indian villages, that though there were local carpets weavers, the other villagers chose to buy one from Liverpool. Well, that is true. I mean, particularly with local produce versus produce coming from afar away, which sadly often is cheaper than local produce. But in the question of time banking, I don't know if that's an issue, because it sounds like this is people are coming to the time bank for a different reason, though.
Yeah, and time banking, it's not supposed to replace sort of paid work, but it might catalyse that paid work. It might be an introduction to people paying for something locally. What's with the mutual aid networks that that we're part of? One of the components of mutual aid networks is savings pools. So that's encouraging people to save together and invest in each other. And I think there's something in here about local communities, how rather than investing our savings or whatever in sort of businesses far away, it's like, how can we do more of that in small small groups there? That's part of our sort of business thing around how we share profit. We save part of our profit to enable, you're enabled to use the shared resources, but then you can then invest in people as they need it. And because you have relationships with the people who are saving together, I don't know, there's something about how that's valued more. So we're working with Living Economies in New Zealand around that, for example. So with their savings pools, people have paid off mortgages with that. So yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Is that rent-free loans to people that are a member of the same saving club?
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that from Mexico as well. Is the mutual aid network linked to the Time Bank in any way?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. So I mean, as I said, we look at like all the ways of exchanging where time banking's the last option rather than the first, and we say, how can you live the life you want to live, do the work you want to do with the help of your community? So it's like, in a sense, it's a way of like how we look at all our sort of different budget lines of like what takes money, what takes exchange, sort of time exchange, what takes barter, to enable us to sort of need less money and live more of, like, if you think going back to the 5 types of work, have more community life, you know, like self, work life,
Mm-hmm.
care life, and all of that. So yeah, time banking is part of that picture. Time banking is a really sort of crucial point to like unlearn that valuing things differently, building trust and relational networks,
Mm-hmm.
and opening us up to more of a sharing economy as well. So we just naturally share what we have. I always say, if we share what we have what you need.
Yeah, yeah. There's one here question: how much of your work depends on government funding? I have a theory that government funding is actually a killer of local communities taking initiatives.
I
What
do
are your
think
thoughts on this?
that's a really interesting one, and one of these projects that we're linked to at the minute, they recently got some funding, and one of the leaders in that project was saying, you know, really, do you need project management? Is that a paid role? And they were saying it doesn't feel right. It takes something away from what we're doing, and they're exploring how they can share that out. But I absolutely hear that. It's like there's something about having funding that it means you end up stepping away, losing touch with the values. It's like of what the initiative is set up to do, and I think that's a real challenge, and I think it's really important to have sort of reflection within that. In terms, you know, I do get paid to do what I do with the TimeBank, not a lot, mind, but and I do think there are roles that are paid roles, but I think there's something in there about how you explore the power dynamic in that as well. It's always being aware of those sorts of dynamics that are going on between members and everything else. So yeah, I
so
think
how do you get paid? Can I ask, Kate?
Yeah,
how's
so,
your
it's a mixture of things. So we've had national lottery funding, like reaching communities. We've got some European funding at the moment around a specific project that's around employment and business startups. We get little bits of funding from little funds and everything. We get commissioned to do some things as well. So this summer we were commissioned to do some big like feast type activity for play days for like families and children in different parks in the city. But what was really great was we were able to pay our chefs to actually do that. So it was a feast style thing. So yeah, it's lots of ways of bringing money in. But we're really keen to look at how we become independent of like the funding. I don't know, it's that thing of being able to be as radical as we want, you know. So, and I think there's something in there around, you always asked about how can you be sustainable. I think actually having these sort of regenerative cooperative systems, you know, we're moving towards becoming a co-op development agency and setting up a sort of umbrella cooperative with membership and all of that. So it's having these principles, but within a system which is encouraging these sort of ethical, small scale businesses that collaborate together. So that's the sort of direction that we're moving in, and Timebanking's would be a member of that, so it's part of it. I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind, because things do lose what they're about.
But it's also important to recognize that nobody can stay in a role as a volunteer long term, and lots of good initiatives have crashed on that because you know, at the end of the day, people get tired. No?
Too right.
There's a related question here on the financial side from Mark. He says, it seems at the very bottom, there's a taboo on financing the expansion of a time bank with time banking hours. Do you put hours aside and pay people for doing work for the time bank? Because that would be another model, no? That would go some way.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting in the UK, you know, for people who are job seeking, earning time credits does count towards job seeking, so it doesn't impact on your benefits. So that's a special dispensation. When we had a period of about 6 months a few years ago where we didn't have funding, which was incredibly stressful, but that was a bit of a test that enabled I mean, someone who does now work for us, she had recently joined, but she did administrative activity for a number of months for time credits. But you know, for her, she said she joined for very practical reasons, that it opened up a whole world to her that she didn't expect. She's an amazing baker, actually, I have to say. Her cakes are just unbelievable. She's an amazing knitter as well. She knits cakes and biscuits and just random stuff, really random. But and yeah, also, you know, I was being paid time credits at that point, but it's not a sustainable thing long term. But because unfortunately the system we've got, we still need money to survive. Yeah, but ultimately that's what mutual aid networks, and we call ourselves humans unified in mutual aid networks. That's what that is about rebalancing it so we can do more for alternative ways of exchanging, whether that's bartering, time credits, sharing, and reduce our need for money.
And there's a question from Hans here, Hans Günther, about whether you pay taxes on timeshare exchange.
No,
I don't suppose so. No.
No, so because the time is equal, no, you don't.
It's a barter.
Yeah, but equal. Yeah, so with like for example, local economic trading systems where the barter is different amounts, then that would be taxable. But with TimeBank, but what we always say is it shouldn't replace paid work. So it shouldn't be a full-time job on time credits. But you know, for our, you know, small businesses and stuff like that, we say it's also an introduction agency for people within the TimeBank, and you might give them discounts because they're a TimeBank member to your business thing as well. So I'm quite interested in how you mix and match these things.
And you might end up with someone getting employed that way.
Absolutely.
Having been introduced to someone, you know, through the TimeBank. And
it definitely does happen. Yeah,
it does. Yeah.
Oh, not for time credits. It might lead them building their work experience to get a paid job.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yes. Now, I also thinking if you went and did a few hours, someone, you might get really excited about that person and think they want to offer them a sort of a job, a paid job. No, like the shop, the community
that
shop.
does happen. Yeah.
And there's one here asking you, well, also, can the businesses prioritize people in the TimeBank? I suppose they wouldn't, because they're not, the TimeBank is not competing with people doing paid work. You know, you wouldn't be hiring anyone from the TimeBank for your business.
Ooh. No, I don't.
Probably not.
So. No, but if someone's developing, for example, if they're developing a food business, they can access our community kitchen. They can access a TimeBank member that might help them with some branding. They could get someone that could help them set up a spreadsheet for their bookkeeping systems. So you could do all of that early. They could use our shared library of kitchen things to get themselves going. Then there comes a point where they might need their own food trailer. So then they might actually get a bit of money, but then also access some time bankers who might help convert it, or it's mix and match. And it's not all or nothing. So it's not either time banking or not time banking. It's like that works in that bit. A price-based exchange works in that bit. Money works in that bit. Sharing works in that bit.
And are they always, all your members, I suppose, are individuals? So you wouldn't have a business that would be a member of Time. You do?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a shopping centre that's a TimeBank member.
How does that work? I can't even imagine it.
This is where we did. They're absolutely amazing. I mean, we've got another project that is about building dual function water system harvesting things, and they give us the pallets. They get loads of pallets. Obviously, it's a shopping centre, you know, but like they're incredible. They're an incredible employer in terms of supporting their employees' well-being. So employees have actually gone on walks with the TimeBank. They've had, you know, we can have TimeBank members go in and do some meditation in the workplace, and you know, all of that. Yeah. So
and then you get pallets instead. They give you that's kind of sounds more like almost you know, a Let's or a system, because it's not just time.
In a sense that's just something that they do the formal exchange. But we've got a member, they've got a community allotment at the shopping centre, and we've got a member that's actually one of our members that's going in and advising them on what to plant and stuff like that. So it's lovely.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that your TimeBank is kind of the way we would envision like a localization hub where all sorts of things could spring out from. And here, in your case, it's been the TimeBank that is playing that role.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And to an extent, there's all sorts of amazing stuff going on everywhere and in the city and all of that. And for me, it's like, how do we join it all together? And how do we get over this? In a sense, it's stepping out of this competitive scarcity sort of story that we've got around. I mean, this is something around even how funding systems are set up with community organisations, that we're set to compete with each other. For me, my heartfelt mantra and reach out is to like, let's work together. Let's get this systemic framework together. Let's look at what you're good at and what you're good at, and then help each other. You know, that's my dream ultimately. And time banking is just might be a mechanism that helps oil that.
No, I think your TimeBank is pretty unusual. I certainly haven't, you know, in all the roles it plays. And in talking about roles, Brad has another question here, whether you have a tool library, because, you know, the tool libraries and repair cafes are also have been catching on now. Like, so he said, like, you have the kitchen equipment loan library. Do you happen to have a tool library too?
We've got some tools. We've got a few workbenches and such like, because we've got this water harvesting system, and it's a training course. But we do in the city, we do have a library, a tool library as well. That's like, it's a business. It's an social enterprise, but that's something that's really taken off. We do also have repair cafes as well that members contribute to as well. So yeah, and I think it's like, if another organisation's doing that, we link it together. You know, it's like, not try and do everything.
Well, no, of course not. That makes a lot of sense. Have you ever thought about setting up a local currency for bartering services as well as goods? Has that been in your mind?
I think it's another thing that's part of that story, isn't it, of all these different ways of exchanging. In a sense, the price-based credit, that would link more to a local currency. So the software, we did have something that was quite interesting that started in the city but is no more, that was I would say it was about incentivized volunteering, but enabled people to actually get discounts and stuff in shops. So that isn't there anymore. But yeah, I mean, with the mutual aid network, the system we've got at the minute, like, you can set up your own, you could call it whatever you want, can't you? It's like you put so much value in, and yeah, absolutely, that needs to be part of the picture as well. I don't think it's that, I think I think there's room for that. I'm not going to do it though.
No. Well, I actually also, we know of quite a lot of local currencies that you know, people have worked very hard for, but that's also
really
proven
important.
You know, really, really difficult to keep up within the current economic system. So I think one might be better off to spend the time on food initiatives, and the TimeBank that you were saying, it seems, you know, in the case of Hull and East Riding, seems to have functioned marvelously as a catalyzer for a much broader spectrum of initiatives now.
But as I say, it's the membership that are the thing that are the catalyzers. Yeah, it's part of the story. Yeah.
And you must have some very creative members for all this to happen, which is inspiring. Here, Jason has a question here. He asks, in your experience, how would you describe the intersection of time banking and food, perhaps in bartering or otherwise, local farmers, CSAs? I mean, you talked a lot about food, which kind of came after your you know, chronologically than to your work with the TimeBank.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a project that it's been another of my on-the-shelf projects for a number of years, called Ready Recipe Box. So we've had the domain name since 2015, but we're doing a market research on that. And I think it's like community assisted agriculture schemes where people do work exchange. I've done it myself actually for our local one. It's wonderful, yeah, exchange for a veg box. So again, with those sort of recipe boxes, actually looking at time exchange to actually get boxes and all. Yeah, I think it's just really interesting mixing these things up. Yeah, and I guess did I answer the question there? Yeah, it is. Yeah, bartering's part of that. Yeah. Sure.
And Joelle is asking here, why is it difficult for local currencies to continue, but seems easier for time banks within the global economy?
Do you know, I don't think it is that easy for time banks. I think it's that thing around not everyone is there's a challenge with time banking. All of these things is people actually think using it first. Even me, who set it up, I remember my fence had blown down and I was asking around for some, if anyone knew someone that could put a fence up, and they went, "You're a time bank asking a time bank." It's like, oh yeah, of course. And I mean, and what was wonderful about that, the member who did our fence, and this is very different to like hiring someone to come and put your fence up, because this is a relational thing. I learned how to concrete posts in, how to get, as he called it, the fence plumb. I learned how to put a fence up as part of that, because it wouldn't have been right for me to actually just like go get on and do the fence, because it's a relational thing. So I think, it's about practicing, and that's what I'd also say. It's like, if getting some people together and just starting, but commit to it and practice it. And we've got to unlearn how we do things, because it's easier just to go back to the business as usual. Well, not easier, because we're so busy to do business as usual, isn't it? So we've got to practice. And I think with local currencies, I think the problem with it is there's a cost to it, isn't there, to the mechanism of the actual physical paper and all that. It's just,
I mean, the thing with the local currencies is also often you pay, for goods. A lot of local shops might only want to take like 5 or 10 or 15% payment in local currency, because often their businesses depends on buying things with the national currency, for ingredients or what have you. So a little bit, and because we all are caught up in this global economy, so it's very, very difficult to accept, say, payment in a local currency 100% or even 50%. That at least been my experience, which means that it very quickly becomes rather marginalized. And there are some that have managed to succeed for decades, like Bristol pound, which now has also gone digital. And so I'm not saying that they can't have any effect at all, but we do know of quite a lot that have come to an end after 2 decades of really hard work. So I think what we are saying is if we as activists have limited time to make changes, maybe in the current system as we are now, it might not be the best place to put our efforts. No?
And in a sense, it's part of the old system as well, isn't it? That sort of. There was a project that I visited when I was in America a couple of years ago called Common Good. It's a Common Good card and app, and that's definitely something worth looking at. So that is a local sort of currency thing, but it's also enables people to have an opportunity to like pay a bit more and put it into it links into food poverty, and links into lots of like sort of, it's in Massachusetts, but it's in different areas, and they're very open to people using that system and helping people. So I'd recommend taking a look at that actually.
Good idea. Good. Here's another question. We are lagging towards the end, so this might be one of the last questions. Also from Jason. Is there a specific a magic number of people that seems to result in the feeling of momentum greater than the sum of its parts? He's saying perhaps somewhere around 100. I don't know if you can put a number on this. Because it's true, if you're too few, it might not be, it might not function. And if you're too many, it could be impersonal, I guess.
Definitely. I think there's this thing about like the optimal number of connections is around 150, isn't it? Like a community. So
Yes.
yeah, which is interesting. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think in practice with our TimeBank, because we're spread across sort of different, we've got a city, and then which is an urban space, and then we've got the different rural communities. So in practice, we've got hubs of members, like in sort of different towns that have got more of a relationship with each other. But then they also, and as I said, that's part of the gift of doing more online through the pandemic, of people connecting across those different places and starting to exchange more widely as well. But yeah, absolutely. It's another question I've not specifically thought about, but yeah, I think that's worth pondering. Maybe like 40 or 50 might start to like really, because people have more than one thing. I think something my learning is that it doesn't just happen. It's not just, I think very often people think it's just about having an app and people exchange. There's a lot of cultural unlearning about how we do stuff. So I think there's probably something about the intent of how we go into it and commit to it that would amplify its success, of like, actually success, that's a weird word as well, amplify the unlearning of how we exchange.
Yeah, definitely need to start think differently. And yeah, our expectations and exactly what you were saying at the beginning, this we also need to learn to ask for help. So that seems to be a big thing, at least with your TimeBank.
Yeah, it's so strong, this thing around moving away from there's the needy and the needed. It's like we're both, that's a really important leveler. And there's very much this stuff about how we come to more of a heart space and how we connect with each other rather than head. And I think we often don't see the sort of I don't know, the lens that we're looking at the world through, which is that, and that there's experts and there's non-experts, and and when you're in a position where you don't have a job, or you've got a mental health condition, or you don't have enough money, or all of those things, that's where all those choices are taken away from you. And it's why should they? We talk about solidarity, not charity, because any one of us could be in that space, So yeah.
Well, from all that I've heard and seen, it seems to me that you must have been bringing the best out in your community and creating a really creative and resourceful community, where pooling all these skills and experiences that people have, and everybody suddenly become important, don't they? Definitely. Everybody has something to offer, which is very different from
and I think there's something, sorry.
No.
Yeah. I just think there's really something important about that sort of personal agency of like our footprint in the world. And I think there's massive challenges often, I don't know, talking to a few people in organisation, but just even organising an event, and like how people are less able to commit to things now, and maybe change their mind at the last moment. And I've sort of been reflecting on this a bit, because each one person doesn't think that they'll have an impact, but actually all of those peoples do have an impact, and that's that impact in the world, isn't it? It's like that. And that thing that together we created the mess that we're in. The route out of it is together as well, and realizing that each one of us and our footprint is important, but it's not any one of us own responsibility. It's how we connect to each other to do that.
And the importance of each person is much more visible on a local level, no? Where everybody have a voice and can have a role. and be very proactive, as you've just shown us.
Yeah.
Any last words from you, Kate, to all of us? Any tips you want to share here at the end?
Just what came to me just then as you were talking is like, it's the amazing gift of doing this, of having conversations that we don't normally have with people, and being curious about people and going deeper with people and unlocking gifts that they don't even know that they've got there, no matter what their situation. And that's a really beautiful thing. And how I just feel so strongly that like we already have what we need. It's just hidden. So, you know, it's like, how do we take the veil away?
Yes, and bring this to the front and create a space where people can exchange what they have for what they need, and offer help to others, like you have so beautifully shown us. Thank you, Kate. I'm so happy that you could make it, and so happy that you are willing to be the first one here in this new series, Voices from the Field.
Thanks so much.
Hope to see you soon again in real life, Kate. Bye.
Bye.